Welcome ladies and gentlemen, Tactical Edge here. Today we have a fifth and final battle between Ezra of Astora and the Norm on this BBB Season 1 Tournament Round 7 Best of 5. For the matchup here, two quite meta factions. On the left side as the Green Army, we have Ezra of Astora controlling the Tomb Kings, and on the red side we have the Norm controlling the Skavens. Now for army builds, Ezra of Astora is going for a front line of skeleton warriors backed up by Screaming Skull catapults. Now, normally you wouldn't think about catapults as an anti-artillery tool, but against Skavens they can be quite useful. They don't have the greatest accuracy, but their explosion damage is pretty solid with armor piercing. Plus, this takeover leadership debuff can be very effective against weapons teams, especially Skavens generally lacking leadership will be routed off extra early under the combined debuff of the takeover and also being bombarded by artillery. At the back we have some skeleton spears protecting the Screaming Skull catapult and 4 Nekara horsemen, 2 on each flank, providing a lot of mobility pressure to hunt down the Skaven artillery and weapons teams. Stalking in plain sight, we have the Eyes of Desert, the regiment of renowned sepulchral stalkers. Their eye lasers have some impressive burst damage, making it a key tool to take down any large Skaven targets, especially armored ones like Doom Wheels and Plague Bells of Grey Seers. Now, for the leadership, we have a Leech Priest of Death coming in with Fate of Buna and Spirit Leech. Leading the army, a Cambrian War Sphinx with a Tomb King mounted on top, providing a reliable source of anti-infantry damage as well as terror to rout off Skaven units. In the far corners, there are a couple Carrions. And that's it for the Tomb King's army builds. For the Skavens, a front line of Skaven slaves backed up by more clan rats. Basically, it's just a really chaffy front line to slow down enemy advance, while the artillery does all the damage here. Poison Wind Globadiers, very powerful weapons teams, can drain away health with the Poison Wind effect. For longer range missiles, there are 3 Jezzails. Their precision fire would be devastating to any Tomb King's construct if they can get in range. Protecting them are a couple clan rat spears and a single council guard, storm vermin with halberds that are unbreakable with elite melee stats, a few red ogres in the middle for a bit of mass blocker plus armor piercing, and leading the army a single Grey Seer of Plague, providing a bunch of summons in the form of Vermintide Dreaded 13th, and then the abilities including Unholy Clamor as well as Scorch for some area of effect damage. And that's it for the army builds. Now let's get the battle started. The battle happened on MP Crossroads, one of the biggest and emptiest map in the entire game, with the 2 deployment zones really far away from each other. Whoever gets the longer range artillery unit has the chance to do the first shot, which is exactly what the Screaming Skull catapult's doing right now, opening fire at the Poison Wind Globadiers. The armor piercing explosions ignoring the armor on the weapons teams, doing some substantial damage already. At the same time, the skeleton infantry will be pushing forward, looking to pin down the Skaven lines, preventing the Grey Seer from getting too close to the artillery and preventing the drop of the clan rat summons, or even worse, Dreaded 13th to silence the artillery. At the same time, with the frontline advance being halted, the Jezzails can no longer advance and get in range to shoot at the Screaming Skull catapults. So this prevents the Jezzails from sniping out the Tomb King's artillery with their precision fire. So instead, the Jezzails turn their attention to the Tomb King, focusing fire onto the large hitbox of the Cambrian War Sphinx. This forces the Norm to respond with the mobility to shut down those Skaven missiles. A very clever move here, using the Nekara horsemen to capture the attention of red ogres, while at the same time the Carrions hit the Jezzails from the back with the support of the Screaming Skull catapult, dropping in those leadership debuff with the takeover effect. The Jezzails quickly falter and will be fleeing from combat. There's also a Fate of Buna deleting this 1 unit of Jezzails. They have a rather small health pool, so as a result the spell took away most of their HP. A lot of resources have gone into shutting down the Skavens, and it is working right now. A completely fresh unit of Carrions dropping onto the routed Jezzails trying to finish them off. While over here on the left flank, more and more mobility pours in. The Nekara horsemen, using their speed advantage, sneak through the gaps between the Skaven lines and now tying down the Warlock Jezzails. The second unit of Globadiers is also silenced by the Carrions. The leadership of Unholy Clamor is holding them together, but that is going to wear off soon, and the Poison Wind's Globadiers will not be holding down for long. That means the Skavens have lost most, if not all, their missile strength, and their killing power lies in a few relatively elite melee units. For example, the Red Ogres, who is their best bet at countering the Nekara Horsemen and perhaps pushing the Screaming Skull catapults at the back. The Skavens do have an elite infantry unit, the Council Guard, but unfortunately right now they are bombarded by all those armor-piercing explosions, taking massive damage. The tight formation of the Council Guard means that they're taking more damage from the artillery, but fortunately they are unbreakable and the take cover leadership debuff does not affect them at all. This is especially useful against Tomb Kings with their abundant supply of fear and terror causing units, as the Council Guard can provide an unwavering anchor for the entire Skaven formation. At this point, the Skavens are trying to consolidate the stronger melee units around the Grey Seer. The Tomb King on his worst things tries to push his way into the blob and hunt down the Grey Seer, but he is surrounded by armor-piercing units, especially the Council Guard, and if he overstays his welcome, he will be taking substantial damage. As a result, the Tomb King is already taking some damage, though it might partly caused by the friendly fire. But the Skavens do have to be aware of the Tomb King's mobility here, as they are now dominating the map control here, using the mobility units to clean away any scattered Skaven infantry. For example, the Carrions here routing off the Giselles and now going after the Poisonwing Globadiers, preventing any kind of Skaven firepower from returning to the fray. The Skavens are trying to form a blob to overwhelm the skeleton front line, but that also makes them an easy target for the Tomb King's artillery. The Screaming Skull catapults, some of them were able to just do some substantial damage to the blobbed infantry of Skaven, though the regrouping Poisonwing Globadiers and the Giselles have captured the attention of some of these artillery. They are once again returning fire against the Giselles, who are trying to shoot at the Tomb King, but with another bombardment from the Screaming Skull catapult, their leadership will once again be debuffed, combined with the effect of a Spirit Leech from a very close by Lich Priest. The accumulated damage will inevitably rout off the tattered Giselle units. Now, as for the front line here, most of the skeleton infantry have been dealt with by the swarm of Skavens, especially a summoning of Storm Vermin among a bunch of skeleton spears. They should be able to hack down the skeleton spears and do some nice damage to the Eyes of Desert just fine. But once the Eyes of Desert start fleeing, their 50 speed should be able to keep themselves ahead of the Storm Vermin, but that doesn't matter anyways, since it has been summoned for quite a while and has already disappeared from the battlefield, no longer a threat. Now, with the lack of infantry protecting the backline, that means the Skavens are free to push the Screaming Skull catapults. They're trying to expand their ammo to do as much damage as possible before they're inevitably shut down by the Skaven push, especially with the Grey Seer dropping in a Clan Red summon, preventing them from escaping. Even the Grey Seer is charging straight into them on his Plague Bell, but that does expose the Grey Seer to the eye lasers of the Sepulchral Stalkers. The Eyes of the Desert are now repositioned, blasting away at the Grey Seer with their poison armor-piercing missiles. They don't have the best range, but if their eye lasers hit, it is devastating in terms of damage. Although the closing in Clan Red Spears and Clan Vulcan's Tail Slashes means that the Eyes of the Desert needs to go on the run once more. Same goes for the second Screaming Skull catapult, where their crew has dropped the artillery and fleeing for their unlife. Unfortunately, they don't have enough speed to get rid of the Skavens and will be hacked down in the pursuit. Overall, the Tomb King's army is still trying to hit the isolated elements of the Skaven army. Some returned Red Ogres are being wiped out by Spirit Leech, and the Tomb King is leaping back and forth between different Skaven units, using the Terror to max effect and rout off any returning Skavens. While the Eyes of Desert is still kiting, at the same time the Grey Seer of Plague is going after some retreating skeleton spears with the support of the Clan Vulcan Tail Slashers, who have just finished off the Screaming Skull catapult crew. Knowing that they won't win this fight, the skeleton spears continues to avoid combat. They're retreating and just buying more time for the Tomb King's army to clean up the scattered Skaven. At this point, the balance of power is actually still quite even, possibly because how healthy the Grey Seer is and the Tomb King instead is quite damaged. Now over here, the Eyes of Desert charge straight into the Skaven slaves. They were almost sandwiched by the Skaven slaves and Clan Red spears in melee. To break the encirclement, they decided to directly engage those Skaven slaves. A very wise decision here, using that charge damage plus the fear trait to break off the Skaven slaves, and now their path of retreat is clear once more, conserving their power to later snipe out the Grey Seer. Now we'll be going into fast forward as both armies are just trying to clean up each other's scattered units. You can see here Carrions dropping onto the Red Ogre, combined with the Spirit Leech, will be finishing off this one remaining monstrous infantry of the Skavens, which means there's no longer any mass blocker to pin down the Tomb Kings, and he is free to charge whatever and wherever he wants. Another Spirit Leech comes in with the support of the Eyes of Desert. The Red Ogres are truly finished and scattered, while the Gracier of Plague plus the Clan Vulcan Tail Slashers will try to regroup with the remaining anti-large infantry here. A lot of Clan Red Spears and a single tattered unit of Council Guard. These guys with their unbreakable trait would literally fight till the last red standing. Right in front of them, the Eyes of Desert still trying to avoid being dragged into melee, using the Skeleton Spears to screen away some of these pursuing Skaven unit, but with an overwhelming number of Skaven units surrounding the Skeleton Spears, even the unrouting undead would not be able to hold for long. The Eyes of Desert continues their retreat to conserve their forces and ammo, while the Tomb King is still cycle charging between different Skaven units, this time setting his eyes on some fleeing Clanrat spears, hoping to shatter them. Now, despite Lenormand's Skavens very effectively screen out the Eyes of Desert, there's still a very effective anti-single entity tool to deal with the Grey Seer, and that is the Spirit Leech. The Lich Priest is constantly spamming that spell, and the Grey Seer is definitely not liking it, as he does not have any healing to mitigate the damage. Now, for a while, the Skavens might seem like retreating and avoiding combat, but the thing is, the Tomb King is actually chasing off the routed unit of the Clan Vulcan Tail Slasher, so that actually fulfills the attacking role. But once that unit's shattered, that means the Tomb Kings will have to return to melee combat once more, trying to find an active unit to engage. The Eyes of Desert going for one last round of focus fire, doing substantial damage to the Grey Seer. But then a dreaded 13th summoned right on top of them forces them into retreat once more. While the Tomb Kings will continue to chase down Clanrat Spears, balance of power is in the favor of Tomb Kings right now, as the Plague Seer is getting lower and lower in terms of health, with the constant Spirit Leeches from the Lich Priest, a very annoying ability yet still very effective. Seeing his minions are constantly chased down in melee, the Tomb King decided, you know what, I'm gonna give up on this worthless Skaven chaff and return to the main phase supporting his own troops. Another unit of Clanrats being summoned onto the battlefield, trying to stabilize that balance of power, but unfortunately there's just nothing to stop the Tomb King from charging straight into the Plague Bell, smashing the Plague Priest, then pushes his way out of the blob and rout off another Skaven chaff again. Although the remaining units of the Tomb Kings are now being finished off, the Clanrats managed to keep up with the retreating Sepulchral Stalkers and keep backstabbing them with their anti-large spears, doing enough damage to put them into crumbling. The reason is that the strength in numbers ability of the Skaven debuffed their speed while buffing up their melee defense and leadership, but once they took enough damage to deactivate that ability, the Clanrats are fast enough to catch up with the Sepulchral Stalker with their charging speed buff. On the far side, the Lich Priest is finished off by some remaining Clanrat Spears being stuck in melee combat for a little too long here, so that means it is indeed the Tomb King versus the world. Now, if the War Sphinx simply stand and fight surrounded by the Council Guard, it might be the Skaven's victory. But the regrouping Skaven chaff, all those Clanrat Spears, are providing some valid targets for the Tomb King to turn around and charge. So instead, the Tomb King managed to perform multiple charge attacks against the Council Guard, and the charge impact damage was substantial. The Tomb King still have quite a bit of HP while the Council Guard is on their last few rats. With the last of Council Guards being finished off, the Tomb King will stand tall and alone in victory. GG and well played to both players for such a close battle. Ezra of Astora did a great job with all the Screaming Skull catapults here, using the skeleton infantry to pin down the Skaven lines, preventing them from advancing, and also denying the Warplug Giselles from reaching the Screaming Skull catapults, while these artillery, using their armor piercing and leadership debuff, successfully routed off those Skaven missile contingent early with the help of some of the mobility units. The Nekaro Horsemen, who also did some pretty solid damage, not as many kills in total, but their mobility pressure was crucial in breaking the Skaven weapons teams. Same goes for these Carrions. Having the ability to fly over Skaven infantry formation is especially useful here. For the more expensive single entities and monsters, Eyes of the Desert did some pretty solid damage overall, not able to earn back their value, but still pretty decent performance, while the Tomb King here not doing a whole lot of damage, as he was just running down chaff, routing them off with his terror, and not exactly that much value can be earned from killing Skaven slaves. Instead, the major damage dealer of this entire Tomb King army is the Lich Priest of Death. That one Fate of Buna deleting those Giselles and then constant spirit leeching all those expensive Skaven units. The Gracier of Plague, the Red Ogres, and some of these weapons teams allowed him to earn back some really solid value despite the lack of kills. Now for the Skaven units, the Warplug Giselles unfortunately didn't do much here. Same goes for the Red Ogres and the Poison Wing Globadiers, unable to earn back their own value. But the surprising MVP of the Skavens is actually not the Council Guard, not the Grey Seer, not the Clan Vulcan Tail Slashers, but the Clan Rat Spears. 1,100 gold worth of damage value probably did a lot of damage to the Tomb King and the Eyes of Desert here. Or perhaps they just dragged down the Leech Priest, as they didn't have that many kills but a lot of damage value for some reason. While the rest of the army here, Council Guard got some decent damage, but unfortunately being bombarded by the armor-piercing Screaming Skull catapults, their performance was rather limited despite being unbreakable, and in the end being charged quite a few times by the Tomb King with the Cambrian War Sphinx and obliterated. For the Grey Seer, not exactly the damaging unit here, earning back some minor value, mostly just spamming those Clan Rat summons and dreaded 13th to try and tie down and grind down the Tomb King's army. For the rest of the Skaven infantry, the other Clan Rat Spears with their shields did some solid damage overall, a pretty good performance, earning back their own cost. And then the Skaven slaves, well, they're Skaven slaves, so not much to talk about. Then last but not least, the Clan Vulcan's Tail Slasher did surprisingly well here, earned back way over their own value, killing a lot of skeleton infantry, having the Regiment of Renown status, giving them extra melee stats and leadership. Overall, a very valiant attempt from Le Norme fighting back against the Tomb Kings despite losing their missiles early, though in the end, the flimsy leadership of the Skaven and the lack of healing did cost them their game. And that shall conclude this Best of 5 series between Azrael of Astora and Le Norme, with Azrael emerging victorious. Now let us wrap up the Best of 5 with a quick summary. The outcome of this Best of 5 is actually quite interesting, with the meta factions getting back-to-back wins. In the first battle, Azrael tried to crush the Dark Elf lines with the heavyweight Ogre Cavalry, but unfortunately the Dark Elves, having plenty of armor piercing, simply rendered the Armored Cavalry ineffective. Right after Le Norme winning as the Dark Elves, Azrael took back a victory as the Dark Elves himself, weakening the Warriors of Chaos army with a bit of kiting and then destroying Be'lakor with Malekith and his Soul Stealers. Right after that, it was 2 rounds of Vampire Count's victory, with Le Norme taking the first one, as the Vampire Counts cracked open the Empire box. The Empire really had a hard time protecting their ranged asset against all those Vampire tools, including summons, flyers, heavy cavalry, and doggles. But then Azrael once again took back a win with the Vampire Counts. Elite as the Chosen are, they simply cannot grind through all those HP available to the Vampire Counts with their healing. So in the end, the ultimate victory of the Best of 5 was decided between the Tomb Kings and Skavens. Azrael with his mobility and the Screaming Skull catapult took out multiple units of Skaven missiles. But Le Norme did not give up and instead fought back valiantly, reconsolidating his forces of melee troops including the Clan Rats, the Council Guard and the Red Ogres around the Grey Seer, forming a powerful melee force. Since the Tomb Kings invested a lot into their missile troops and their mobility, their ability to stand and fight through melee grinds is actually weakened, allowing Le Norme to use his anti-large troops to drag down a lot of the Tomb Kings units. Though unfortunately in the end, the Spirit Leeches plus the charge of the Tomb Kings was just too much for the Grey Seer given his lack of healing. With the Skavens losing their leader, most of the chaff were forced into a rout, leaving only the Council Guards in play, who are not enough to deal with a charging War Sphinx. As a result, Azrael of Astora managed to claim the final victory in this Best of 5 series in the round 7 of BBB Season 1 tournament. Both players have some great moments in this Best of 5 series, and I hope viewers you enjoy this as much as I do. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more multiplayer action, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.